John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Most Bible scholars believe that in this rhetorical context, Word refers specifically to Jesus. Now, why would that be? Why would Jesus be synonymous with Word? Why is Jesus Word as opposed to justice, mercy, love, peace, or other characteristics that we know about Christ? What can we infer from that? Given the rhetorical context, I believe, and as do many Bible scholars, that basically it's because the key reason for Jesus coming to earth was to communicate God's message to God's people. And that's really the key foundation when you're looking at writing. Any writing you're doing, the key thing you're doing is you as a writer or speaker are communicating a message to a specific audience. And that's what we always have to keep in mind. You're not writing something in the abyss or in a vacuum. You are writing a specific message with a specific purpose to a specific audience. And you must keep that in the forefront in your mind. Therefore, as we're going through this video, my hope is that by the time you have watched it, participants will be able to do three things. First, begin applying the communication expected of you as an academic and/or a professional who has supervisory responsibilities. Number two, you can demonstrate comprehension of the foundations of writing, which are communicating a message that meets the expectations of its given rhetorical context. And three, start applying strategies for deciphering and writing in specific genres, particularly academic genres. So we're going to start with some of the foundation principles of writing. First of all, understand that as emerging doctoral students, you are now heightening yourself as professionals. You are moving from an educated academic or professional to someone who has a doctorate. And with the doctorate comes certain responsibilities and expectations. So from now on, now that you're a doctoral student and soon you'll have those new 3 little letters behind your name, you will be expected that whatever you write, whether it's an email or whether it's an academic paper, that it's clean of any type of mechanical errors. Another expectation is that you are now writing in a very concise manner, no extra words. You are writing to other professionals, and they don't have time to read those extra words. So they are expecting efficiency in your writing. Number 3, that as a professional, you are starting to use more technical vocabulary that are used by people in that specific discourse community. 4, now that you are writing as a professional and as an academic, your stance is different. Instead of writing as you talk or as you might do informal conversation, you are writing as a professional in a formal stance, which means you write in third person, you do not use slang, you do not use words like or definitely or awesome or totally, because that is slang and that is more conversational. In your writing, you are an academic and a professional, and you need to present yourself that way. Your writing needs to be precise rather than exaggerated. So instead of saying, this would take 40 years to do, it would be, this should take approximately 4 months to complete. Be precise in your language and precise in your information rather than exaggeration. Also, if possible, your writing should have elegance. And people don't often understand what writing elegance means. Writing elegance means that your writing is simple, but it conveys very deep, complex ideas. And too often, novice academics and novice professionals invert that, and instead of writing simple language, deep ideas, what they do is use a whole lot of big words to convey a simple message. And then they've inverted that, and their writing isn't elegant at all. Actually, it's usually not very good when you do that. So now that you are moving to being an academic and a heightened professional, then your writing needs to express that. Let me give you one little trick as you're doing that to be able to write more concisely. You were probably taught as an 8th grader that when you write, use a whole bunch of adjectives to make your point and to be very detailed. Actually, that usually detracts from a message. So instead of using a lot of adjectives, use a few adjectives and very clear, precise verbs. So practice that when you're revising and editing your work, and you'll find out you'll come up with a better product. All right, now we're shifting to understanding rhetorical context. And what is rhetorical context? I'm explaining this from what would be a classical perspective, so I'm using as my foundation Aristotle's Rhetorica. Okay? And basically what Aristotle says, and you may say, well, that was 2,000 years ago, which it was 2,000 years ago, or a little over 2,000 years ago. But what we know about the research today is the principles I'm going to describe, we are also seeing in more recent research about effective writing and effective writers. And that is, when you go into any writing or speaking situation, think of yourself as entering a specific rhetorical context. That consists of 3 items, sort of like a triangle. Number 1, who is my audience? To whom am I writing and what role are they taking? Are they an evaluator? Are they a consumer? Are they my colleague? But your writer goes into a specific mode and you write to that role your audience has taken. Number 2, what is the purpose? What am I trying to accomplish by writing this specific text? What do I want to happen when I have completed the text? What is the message I'm communicating? And 3, what is my role with the audience? Am I a colleague? Am I a supervisor? Is this someone I report to? What is your relationship? And that makes a difference how you phrase things and how you put things together. For example, yesterday I was working on a grant that I'm collaboratively writing with other people. And as we wrote the grant, we consistently went back to, well, maybe we shouldn't use this phrase because the audience won't understand it, or the audience doesn't get this, so this should be explained this way, or does the audience really want that level of detail? And we were always going back to, what does the audience want? What will appeal to the audience? Who is that audience? Consistently as we wrote, and hopefully it will be a successful grant. Now, next thing to understand is, we've already said part of our rhetorical context is audience, speaker, purpose. But another thing we have to remember is you're always writing in a specific type of discourse. There are 3 main discourses, and that is 1, informative writing, to inform your reader of information. Number 2, persuasive writing, to either change your reader's viewpoint or to do a call to action. And number 3 is expressive writing or narrative writing, where you're telling a story. And whether that story is to express a feeling or to get across an idea, it's still expressive writing. So those are the 3 types of discourse that you will write. Now, why is that important to understand the specific discourse that you're writing in? Because if you mix discourses, you will not be able to communicate your message effectively. For example, many students run into problems when they're writing their dissertation because they think it is persuasive. No, 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 no. A dissertation is an informative text and genre. You are informing your reader of, this is what we know about the topic, this is what my research covered, this is what I found, this is my analysis or conclusions. Not, audience, this is what you do. You do not do that, and it will not be published or even accepted by your dissertation committee if you try to persuade them. It needs to be strictly an informative genre. Next thing, I want to talk just a few minutes of some genres, and I'll get into genres later, that you may be familiar with so you can understand the kind of discourse that each of these encompasses. So first of all, a newspaper. What discourse would that be? Informative. Newspapers are informative unless it's the opinion page, which of course is persuasive. What about a thank you note? A thank you note would be an expressive discourse, where you are expressing a feeling to the person to whom you're writing the note. A grant, this may surprise you. I told you I was working on a grant a few minutes ago, and a grant is actually an informative text. It's not expressive, what you're trying to say, oh, we really need this grant and we'd love to have the money, and it's not a persuasive where you're saying, you need to give us this money. It is, this is the problem, this is a way we'll deal with the problem, this is what it will cost, this is what we do, this is how we measure it. Now our bottom line purpose is we want the money back from the grant, but it's still, you've got a better chance of getting it if it's very logical and very informative. Now, journal articles, again, it's an informative discourse. Like a dissertation, you're not persuading your reader, you're informing your reader. Another example might be a memo that you write. A memo is going to either summarize a previous meeting or give specific information to your audience. A committee charter, again, it's informative. It's explaining the rules and the paradigm of a given committee. Now, you might see a pattern emerging in all the examples I've given, which is, gosh, almost all are informative. That's right. As you are becoming a professional and an academic, understand that the bulk of what you write is not going to be persuasive. The bulk of what you write will be informative, and you need to write with that thought in mind. You're not persuading your reader, you're giving the reader information. Now, occasionally, these texts will merge at certain points. For example, I already gave you the example that in a grant, it's not uncommon that, yes, it is informative, but the bottom line is I want you to give me the money. So it does have a little bit of that persuasive purpose to it. By the same token, 15 years ago, when you read a newspaper article, they always started most important detail to least important detail, and the intro paragraph was who, what, when, where, why, how. If you pick up a newspaper today, the front page doesn't look that way. Newspaper articles today always begin with the story, then they go to who, what, when, where, why, how, and most important details. Why? Because journalists have found if they're going to get people to read their articles, they've got to get a hook. So they use that as a hook. Along those lines, in the peer-reviewed journals which I read, which are in the area of literacy, it's very common for the writers, again, to begin with a story. So they start with a story that connects to the key point they're trying to make, and so that story is personal and is in that expressive narrative genre, but the rest of the text moves quickly to academic, formal stance, and it's also only informative writing. So I'm just giving you a few examples, and you've got to read the genres that you are writing in and the rhetorical context to know when that's acceptable and when it's not acceptable. Okay. Now, how do you do that? How do you figure out how to write for a specific genre? So I want to give you some hints of things to look at. The most valuable thing you can do if you get an assignment from a professor is ask for models. Ask for examples of how that's written. And the same thing in the professional workplace. If you're asked to put together some kind of a proposal, whoever's asking you to do that, I would say, do you have any examples of some good ones that other people wrote? And then examine those to figure out what are the stylistic things that they're doing and that it's working, and then how can I model those or how can I emulate those? So here are the kind of stylistic things that you might look for. Number one, what is the physical appearance of the text? Does it have boldface writing? Does it have multicolors? Is it monochrome? Do they use subheads? Is it handwritten or is it a typed text? More than likely it's a typed text, but let me give you an example. Earlier today, I was writing a sympathy note to someone. My writing is awful. Most third graders write better than I do. I hate my handwriting, but I did the best I could, but it's just really bad, okay? But nonetheless, if I had typed a sympathy note to someone, then I'm conveying a very cold, informal tone to them as opposed to a more intimate tone, which is expressed in the physical appearance of handwriting. So I will always handwrite a thank you note or a sympathy card because it is more personal in nature. So look at the physical appearance of a text because that's part of the message that's being conveyed. Number two, what's the level of formality? In writing in your doctoral program, because much of it is online, most of you are going to be writing discussion forum posts. Those are a little more informal. Now, they still need to be clean for mechanical errors because you're an academic professional, but even though it's clean from errors, it's a little more personal because you have a relationship with the people who are reading it. So it can be a little less formal. But when you are writing a research paper for your classes, that needs to be very formal. Again, third person, formal stance, no slang, and so forth. Another thing to look for, are they using technical or content-specific vocabulary in the genre you're writing? And more than likely, they probably are. As you get to more specific levels of academics or more specific levels of professionalism, you're usually writing technical vocabulary, whether you're in the health sciences or whether you're in business or whether you're in education. Next thing, what is the purpose of the text? Look at that, and that will also tell you the genre. Is the purpose of the text to think through and figure out what you're thinking by writing, which is part of what you're doing with the discussion forum text? Or is it you've already got the answers and then you're giving out information, which is what you would do probably in a research article. Next thing, look very closely at structure. Does the text have subheads? And by the way, anytime you can use subheads in your writing, I suggest you do it. It keeps you organized and it keeps your reader organized, which is one of the best ways to help them be able to read quickly and understand the message you're conveying. So, does it have subheads or is that not accepted? And it's not accepted in some rhetorical contexts. How is it organized? Most important to least important. Is it organized according to topics? How is the text organized? Does it have specific sections? And how are those developed and designed? So you want to look at that and be sure that you emulate that same style. Does it use passive voice? Does it avoid passive voice? Those are the things that are important. Finally, what is the paragraph length and what is the sentence length? Typically in standard Western discourse, 25 words is about the average sentence length that we're looking at for writing which is concise and readable and cohesive, but not choppy. But they may have shorter sentences, or they may have longer sentences, or shorter or longer paragraphs. So look at that. In most academic writings, your paragraphs are going to be a half to 3/4 of a page. However, in some contexts, they may be much shorter, particularly in business. Most business contexts, paragraphs are considerably shorter than they are in writing contests. Okay, so you're in one of your classes, you're writing, you're given your syllabus and your assignment sheets, and now you have to write stuff and you're thinking, I've never written that kind of thing before. I have no idea how to write a reflection paper. I have no idea how to do a discussion forum post. So how do you figure it out? How do you figure out how to write this genre that you've never seen before? Step number 1 is read your syllabus closely and read the assignment sheet in the given syllabus. Then ask yourself, what is the discourse that is expected? Do they want persuasive, informative, or expressive narrative? And if you have to guess, you can't tell for sure, first of all, ask your professor. But if you can't do that, move to informative. So for example, if you are writing in the medical field and you are taking notes on the information a patient gives you, that's definitely informative. You don't want to persuade the provider or the medical person looking at this of something specific. You're giving them the facts. All right? Second thing, what are the parameters of the assignment that you are given? What is the length that they want? What is the structure that they want? What are the questions that they want answered, and so forth. And follow those parameters exactly. For example, I frequently write accreditation reports, and I am, as I told you a few moments ago, I'm working on a grant right now. Those have very strict word and character limits. And so if you go beyond the characters, it stops and it kicks out your work. So you have to pay very close attention that you follow exactly what is being asked of you and that you answer those. So if there's a word limit or a page limit, follow it. Don't assume that you can do less or you can do more. You need to follow what the guidelines are exactly. Along those lines, one of the complaints I hear most frequently from professors of a frustration, and this is particularly in discussion forum posts, is they say, I ask a question and then the student gives me an answer that has nothing to do with the question. This is what I want to know, and they gave me good information, but it doesn't answer the question. And so they fail them because they don't answer the question. So you need to go back and say, here is the question, did I answer that question? And you may say, well, that's just the professors. No, it's not just the professors. Back to the grant I was writing, I'm collaboratively writing this grant. We drafted it the other day and we were going, actually it's a little closer to a final draft, but as we went through each section, we read the section, we made changes, and then we went back to the prompts for every given section and said, this word, did we answer that? Boom, yes, it's here. Is this answered? Yes, it's here. Is this answered? Yes, it's here. Ooh, we've got this section right here, and they didn't ask for that in the prompt. We took it out. So you have to make sure that with exactly what is asked of you, you are telling, and no more than that. You can't say, well, when you're answering something in a prompt, you know what, I'm not sure it's going to answer that, so I'm just going to tell them everything I know and hopefully I'll hit it somewhere. Not at the doctoral level. I remember the first time I did that in a doctoral course and I got a 0, not because I didn't answer the question, but because I told them everything I knew that even related to the question instead of concisely getting to the point, answering the question, and moving on. So remember that when you're writing. Next thing, let's look at, we've talked about looking at the assignment sheet to figure out what to write. Another trick is looking at the rubric. What is the rubric? What are the expectations in the rubric? And if you can follow that closely, you will be successful in your assignment. Unfortunately, when you're a professional, you don't get a rubric, but if you look at good models, you can get an idea of what good writing is. Now, the other thing you want to think of is how am I going to organize my text? Because organization is one of the best ways to communicate a clear message to your reader. So when you're looking at organization, again, I'm hitting it again, if you can use subheads because they help you organize your text. Then the next thing you want to look at is, what about my paragraph structure? So when you're structuring your paragraph, remember, one key idea per paragraph, and that's all. The second thing is, have I used specific strategies to guide my reader to the message that I want to communicate? And how did I do that? Again, subheads is a great way to do that. Another trick to communicate a message to your reader is to use topic sentences. The third thing that you can do to communicate a message is, you don't want to do it too much because it's annoying, but you use transitions between paragraphs to signal to your reader, I'm going from point A to point B. It's kind of like when you're turning a corner when you're driving somewhere. Oh, here's a sign that I need to turn, so I make the turn. That's what a transition does. It's a sign to your reader saying, okay, now we're going in another direction, or now I'm adding to something. So you want them between paragraphs and occasionally between sentences within a paragraph. If you do it too frequently, it's I said, it's annoying. It's kind of like when you're using Google Maps and the person says, now you're going another 3 miles before you turn, and then now you're going 2 miles before. It's annoying. Just tell me when to turn. So be careful that you don't do it too often, all right? Another thing is, when you're writing, you want to have depth of ideas rather than a lot of verbiage, because again, your reader has X amount of time, and if you do not do it quickly, you're going to lose them. Finally, each paragraph that you write has got to support the thesis of your entire text or the key point of that subtext. So back to a grant, which does not have a thesis. As I told you before, every section we checked, does it go back and does it meet the point that it's supposed to for that particular section? And then big picture, does it help support the point we want to make on the big grant overall? And we check that with every single part, and you are going to need to do the same in all the academic and professional writings that you do. When you're finished, ask yourself, number one, did my text fulfill the assignment, whether it's a professional text or an academic text? Number two, what's my reader's takeaway from the text, and is that the takeaway that I want? Example, when I created this video, I had an idea in mind of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, and then after I went through it a few times, it's like, oh, you know what? Some of the stuff I have doesn't really meet my objectives, and some of the things I'm doing I need to keep because I talked to some other people about what they wanted in here, and I don't have that as an objective. So I redid it and made sure that the objectives and the content match each other, and you will need to do the same in your professional as well as in your academic writing. All right. Now, last thing that I want to talk to you a little bit about are maybe some genres and some types of writing which you will experience in a Bethel doctoral program, and try to think, what is the discourse for each of these genres? Remember, each of these that you write, even if it's a little more informal genre, you still need to use that academic stance and academic language in your writing. I have not talked about academic language in this video, but it does exist in another video. Now, first of all, you may be writing a reflection paper. As you might guess, a reflection paper is going to be an expressive discourse. But with a reflection paper, you also need to reflect on something that's deep, not just I think. Get a specific point which you are thinking about and reflect on it at a level of depth, as opposed to just summarizing everything. Nope, a reflection paper goes small and deep rather than broad and shallow. Number two, when you write discussion forum posts, they're a bit of a mix between reflecting writing, because a discussion forum post should exemplify your thoughts as you're working your ideas through and figuring out your ideas. But they also need to be informative, because you're informing your colleagues or your peers as well as your teacher about what you know on the given topic. So discussion forum posts should, when at all possible, include internal citation and then references to comments that other people are making. That's stronger. And actually, as a professional, that's something you should practice doing in meeting situations. Instead of just saying, I think this, or what about this idea, always be referencing the other people in the room, because what you're showing them is, A, you're honoring them and treating them respectfully, because you're saying, I listened to you and I thought what you had to say was worthwhile, even if I disagree with you. So you want to do that in your discussion forum post. Again, informative, but it's also you're thinking through something. So that's one of those that has a little bit of mixture of discourses. When you do an annotated bibliography, which you will have to do in some of your programs, the key with the annotated bibliography is, again, informative discourse, but everything needs to be organized the same way. And you may say, well, that's really boring. You're right. But your audience doesn't care that it's boring. What your audience wants is concise information that he or she can quickly grasp as a reference tool. So the more that it's organized and structured the very same way, the easier it is for your audience to access information. So if you begin your annotated bibliography, the first sentence is something like author, year it's published, and then the key purpose. Every annotation you have after that needs to be the same way. And those are publishable, by the way. I've published a few annotated bibliographies in the past. So that is a discourse you also will be doing in your doctoral program, and it will be helpful for you to understand. Another one you may be doing is a dissertation. Not going to talk about that one in this video because it's very, very long and it's more detailed. But I will tell you this, like any research that you do, and hopefully you can get some research publications and conference presentations out of your dissertation. Like any research you do, when you present that information in an oral venue or in a written rhetorical context, it is informative, not persuasive. I had that conversation earlier today with some doctoral program directors, and they said that's what drives them nuts in dissertations, is the students often will try to say, well, we know this, we know this, we know this, but you should know. We know this, we know this, we know this. Cut out the you shoulds. Your audience is intelligent. They can figure it out from the quality of writing that you are going to be able to do. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm really taking kind of a spin off, but I'm doing that because this is one of those sinkholes which often doctoral students fall into. And that is organizing things when you are comparing and contrasting two different items. So I'm going to move from talking about discourse, genre, and move to talking a little bit about organization. So when you organize a text that is compare and contrast, there are two key ways that you can organize those. One is organize it according to the two items which you're comparing and contrasting, and the second way you organize it is according to the various elements which you are comparing and contrasting. All right? So if you are doing the first way, which you, and I'm going to, just to have an example to work from, I'm going to say, okay, this is a principal who is trying to figure out which type of academic calendar is better, a year-round calendar or a traditional agrarian 9-month calendar. So those are the two items we're going to compare and contrast. So if you do that according to the things that you're comparing and contrasting, you may start with the academic calendar that is year-round, and then what are the things you're looking at? What are the elements? Could be student learning, cost, structural stress, community preference. Then by the same token, then you would look at the same thing with 9-month calendar. 9-month, and in the very same order, because you want your organization to be the same for your audience, 9-month calendar, student learning, cost, structural stress, community preference. The second way to organize would be according to whatever those elements are. So let's say your first element is student learning. You would say year-round academic calendar, 9-month calendar. And if your item after that is cost, then it would be cost, year-round calendar, 9-month. Whichever method you use, make sure that you always organize in the same way because it's easier for your reader and for your reader to reference back. Of those two systems, the one that typically works the best is to go by the elements. So it would be student learning, year-round calendar, 9-month calendar. Cost, year-round calendar, 9-month calendar. Community expectations, year-round calendar, 9-month calendar, or whatever they are. That typically works the best. 95% of the time, that's your go-to. The one time that it doesn't work as well is if you have a situation where you're comparing and contrasting two items, but the elements within each are not the same. They're very different. Then it's almost impossible to do it. So then you have to list everything on the first one that you are comparing, and then everything on the second one in which you are comparing and contrasting. All right. Now let's go back to what we hope that you got from this video. So the whole reason for this video is to help you communicate a message and to learn some ways that you can better communicate a message to your given audience as the reason for God sent Christ to earth, to communicate a specific message with a specific purpose to a specific audience. So my hope is that after this video, you will be able to do three things. One, apply academic and professional communication because you're a doctoral student. You have risen to that and you can now do that. Secondly, that you are understanding the foundational elements of writing, which are writing within a rhetorical context and writing specific discourses and not confusing those discourses when it's inappropriate. Third, my hope is that you can apply strategies for deciphering and writing in specific genres, particularly those that are academic. Thanks.